Hello, it's Dr. Patricia Coughlin talking to you again about all kinds of ways you can get better at what you do, improve your outcomes, and also increase your own morale and excitement about doing work of depth and significance. We've talked about how to do a detailed inquiry, get and sustain an internal focus, how to identify defenses, regressive as well as repressive. And today I really want to talk to you about the importance of anxiety, understanding anxiety, tracking it, regulating it, and obviously helping your patients to do so. It has really struck me recently. I've taken in like 3 new patients. And in every case, I mean, these are people who have had many, many therapies in the past: outpatient, inpatient, day treatment. And not a one of them seemed to know that anxiety is simply a feeling in the body, a biophysiological response to some sort of emotional or interpersonal threat. I think this is because many practitioners don't know this, and they seem to conflate the internal experience of anxiety with the kinds of defenses people use to try to avoid or regulate it. So, for example, the tendency to worry, obsess, ruminate, catastrophize, that's not anxiety, right? Again, anxiety is just a biophysiological response to threat. And going to thoughts, ruminating, obsessing, is a defense that then can boomerang and just fuel the anxiety. So, for this recent patient, who again has had 30 plus years of recurrent major depression, did come in with some awareness that he was anxious. And I said, "That's great, that you're noticing that. Tell me how you feel that inside." So he started to tell me about his thoughts and his worries. And I said, "Yeah, those are your thoughts. And how are you experiencing it inside physically?" And he like stopped in his tracks. Like, "What do you mean?" I thought that was my anxiety. Uh, you mean it's not? Well, let's look, right? So this was like a huge aha for him. And then when we could see that he was actually extremely detached from his inner world, he didn't really know what he was feeling. He was just aware of what he was thinking. We could begin to make sense of why he had this history of recurrent depression, right? If he's not aware of what he's feeling, he can't regulate it. He can't pay attention to it as a signal that feelings are coming up so he can make sense of it and use these feelings and sensations as, I often say, like an inner GPS to guide us, right? Our feelings are energy and information. So when patients are detached from that, they are driving blind. So I think this is so important for practitioners to understand, right? And to zero in on how the patient is actually experiencing the anxiety physically, physiologically. And Habib Davanloo, who was one of my great teachers, somehow in his own work identified or seemed to become aware that there were different, what he called channels of anxiety, ways that anxiety was channeled in the body that actually had great diagnostic significance. The first of these was what he calls striated or voluntary muscle. So this is the case when patients are aware that they're anxious and they tense up. And the cardinal signs of this are sighing, respiration, and hand clenching. So this is actually a very good sign. And typically, when you're seeing anxiety in those voluntary muscles and you ask someone how they're feeling, they'll say they're nervous, anxious, tense. And so the fact that they're aware of it, that they can connect the experience of anxiety with physical tension, is actually a positive sign. It's an indication that they have some psychological awareness. They have an ability to connect emotions and a physical response, and they usually have some idea what that anxiety is about. So I'll typically ask when they come in and they say they're nervous, and I see these signs of muscle tension. I'll ask them, well, what's your idea about that? What is it about coming here to see me that is actually triggering this anxiety? And it's usually one of two things. Either they'll say, well, you're a stranger, I don't know about opening up, right? So they're going to let you know that their primary anxiety is interpersonal. It's about opening up and revealing themselves to another person, in this case, you. But the other one is they'll say, well, I'm kind of afraid, like, what am I going to find out? What's going on inside me that's causing these problems I'm having? I want to find out, but I'm kind of afraid to find out. So they'll let you know it's mostly internal, right? They're afraid of their own feelings, emotions, fantasies, desires, and so on, right? So again, this is a good sign. If you don't see anxiety in the striated muscle, so if they either say they're anxious and nervous, but there's no sign of it, um, then you're going to inquire, well, where is that going? So the other two channels that Davenlu identified was into the smooth muscle. So these are patients who, instead of tensing up physically, their smooth muscle in the bowel will get activated. So they might have irritable bowel syndrome or ulcerative colitis. It can go into tension headaches. It can go into respiratory distress. You can get somatic symptoms like dermatitis, hives, things like this. So whereas the voluntary muscle we have control over, these are muscles we don't have control over, right, in the bowel and so on, right? So that is more of a warning sign to you, what we might call a yellow light, a caution. We're not going to be pressing for emotions and feelings until the person is actually in their body and in striated muscle, right? So if they're in that smooth muscle with some kind of weakness, right, we're going to need to build them up to the point where they can tolerate the conscious experience of anxiety. And then the third channel is into what Davenlu called the cognitive perceptual realm. So these are patients who, when they get anxious, literally can't see straight, or they'll have a narrowing of the visual field, or fuzziness, they'll have ringing in their ears, they become dissociated, lose track of their thoughts. So these folks generally are more fragile. Now, again, it all depends. Anybody can have a momentary blip of, getting so anxious that they lose track of their thoughts for a minute. So you want to take this into consideration in the whole picture. But I remember a patient I had who, he just sat down. I just asked him why he was there, right? No pressure for any kind of emotion or anything. And, he got dizzy and confused. So again, this would be a sign of greater fragility, that these folks are not able to mentalize or use, their thinking to deal with their anxiety. They might go to projection or much more primitive defenses in the face of anxiety. So depending again on where the anxiety is, it's both a diagnostic indicator of their ego-adaptive capacity, and it's also going to guide us into what kind of approach we're going to be able to take, whether we're going to be able to do a rapid intervention and go for an unlocking, or whether we're going to need to restructure the patient or use a more graded approach to increase capacity. So I hope this, it's a complex topic, but I just wanted to emphasize again how important it is to really track anxiety, to learn how to assess it, where it is, what the patient's capacity to tolerate it is without resorting to really primitive defenses, and also helping the patient become aware of how they're experiencing that anxiety in their body so they're going to be better able to regulate it and use it, right, as a sign that feelings are coming up that they're uncomfortable about. So again, I hope this is helpful to you. I really look forward to hearing from you. And again, I'm open to any and all topics that you really would like to have covered here. Thanks, and again, Happy New Year.